Hello and welcome to Real Obscure. My name is Kevin H. Shaw, and in tonight's episode we'll witness 5 fear-filled fables, tales of terror and stories of the sinister, where justice is served from beyond the grave. Wait, no, that's a different movie. In a gleefully ghoulish gallery of the grim. From 1972, it's the Amicus Anthology classic, Tales from the Crypt. The movie is based on the legendary strips that first appeared in EC Comics' triumvirate of terror, The Vault of Horror, The Haunt of Fear, and the titular Tales from the Crypt. For those unfamiliar with EC Comics, the company was founded in 1944 as Educational Comics, their original focus being on a line of, as the name suggests, titles intended to be informative and educational. However, when founder Max Gaines was killed in a boating accident, his son William took over the family business, and after changing the company's name to Entertaining Comics, shifted the focus to comics featuring romance, crime, science fiction, and horror. Their comics were a huge hit with their young audience, who relished their tales of ironic justice, grisly comeuppance, and horrifying humour. But the publication of the infamous Seduction of the Innocent, a book written by Dr. Frederick Wortham that was used to make connections between juvenile delinquency and crime comics, forced EC to tone down their horrific content, which of course resulted in a drop of their sales, and so in the mid-50s they did away with their grisly grimoires of ghoulish glee, focusing instead solely on their earlier side project turned money spinner, Mad Magazine, which EC continued to publish until 2018. The movie was produced by the legendary Amicus Productions. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, as I've already mentioned them in my discussion of the classic Dead of Night, and I'm also planning to do a retrospective of the company's anthologies, but essentially Amicus was a contemporary of Hammer Studios. But whereas Hammer tended to produce gothic or period horror, Amicus instead focused on more contemporary stories, and would often be written in the portmanteau fashion, that is, being a collection of short stories presented with a wraparound that introduced each. The advantage was that Amicus could hire big names but have their stars only filmed for a few days, thus cutting costs and allowing them to pack the movies with an array of famous actors. And as they were generally set in contemporary times, it also cut down on the costs of building lavish castles or expensive historical costumes. Best of all, if a story wasn't so great, well, at least it wasn't a feature-length tale, and a new story would be along in a few minutes. Tales from the Crypt was directed by Freddie Francis. He began his career as a cinematographer in the 50s before moving into directing. He's probably best known for his work with Hammer and Amicus, including directing The Evil of Frankenstein, Dracula Has Risen from the Grave, Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, The Creeping Flesh, and The Ghoul, plus a host of TV shows including The Champions, Man in a Suitcase, and in a lovely bit of bookending, an episode of the HBO series based on Tales from the Crypt. He won numerous accolades as a cinematographer and was a much sought after talent, working on such movies as The Innocents, The French Lieutenant's Woman, Glory, and Scorsese's remake of Cape Fear. He also collaborated with the sorely missed visionary David Lynch on The Elephant Man, Dune, and A Straight Story. He was a 4-time BAFTA nominee and 2-time Oscar winner for his work as a cinematographer, and received worldwide recognition for his contributions to filmmaking before his death in 2007. So, what's it all about? The movie opens with Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor, or that scary organ music as most people know it, as the camera roams around Highgate Cemetery. It's worth noting that just a few years earlier, the cemetery had been at the centre of a mysterious case involving the Highgate vampire, which included everything from sightings of spectral forms, Satanism, and even the desecration of bodies that had been laid to rest in the graveyard. so it's likely audiences of the time who were familiar with the location would also be familiar with the case, which made the national headlines and received television coverage just a few years prior. Anyway, after the suitably scary introduction, we see a tour of the crypts being led by a guide played by Jeffrey Belden. An icon of cult TV and movies, he appeared in a slew of TV guest spots, including The Avengers, The Saint, Danger Man, Journey to the Unknown, The Tomorrow People, and Space 1999. He's probably best known for his roles as Catweasel and the Crowman in Wurzel Gummidge, plus his various appearances in movies, including The Horror of Dracula, Casino Royale, that's the original, not the boring Daniel Craig one, Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, Asylum, and The Monster Club. And like every other British actor of the time, he also appeared in Doctor Who. When one of the tour party drops her brooch, she and 4 others pause to locate it, only to find themselves lost as the tour has moved on without them. Eventually the 5 find themselves in a strange chamber with an even stranger monk-like figure who, over the course of the movie, speaks to each in turn, revealing a warning for their future. Now, as this is an anthology movie, I'm going to break down the cast for each in turn and discuss the plot without spoilers. However, before we get to that, I'll just quickly touch on the career of Sir Ralph Richardson, who plays this mysterious hooded figure. Although now known as a star of stage and screen, Richardson initially pursued a career as a painter, but joined a theatre troupe after seeing a performance of Hamlet in 1920. Over the course of the next 60 years, he appeared in a variety of touring plays, whilst also enjoying a successful career in both television and movies, including the Karloff movie The Ghoul, Things to Come, The 300 Spartans, Dr. Zhivago, Rollerball, Dragon Slayer, and Time Bandits. He begins by speaking to the first of the party, Joanne, who is played by Dame Joan Collins. She's one of those actors you'll know for specific roles based on your age and her era. Soap opera fans will recognise her as Alexis from Dynasty or Dynasty. Nerds like us will remember her from Star Trek's greatest ever episode, The City on the Edge of Forever, you know, the one where Bones goes mad and jumps through the giant stone donut. Older British alcoholics will know her from her comedic ads for Cinzano with Leonard Rossiter, and to smut connoisseurs, she will always be Fontaine Carled from The Stud and The Bitch. This first story segment, based on the strip All Through the House, is, as the name suggests, set at Christmas. As a radio broadcast of Christmas carols plays, we're introduced to Richard, who, in fine festive spirit, reads the tag upon his gift to his wife Joan Collins, before sitting down to enjoy a cigar with his newspaper. And he is then brutally clubbed to death by his wife. Richard is played by Martin Boddy, an actor with about 30 credits as policeman or police sergeant. He also appeared in a number of cult movies, including The Rise and Rise of Michael Rimmer, the original Bedazzled, Psychomania, and Dark Places. Joanne, we discover, plans to stage an accident to claim on Richard's life insurance. However, as she busies herself with attempting to move her husband's body and clean up the mess, she also has to contend with the fact that her daughter Carol, which I actually just realised is a little joke, Christmas Carol, she also has to contend with the fact that her daughter Carol is excitedly awaiting the arrival of Santa Claus, and like all kids of that age at Christmas, is in bed but refusing to go to sleep. Carol is played by Chloe Franks. She was very much Amicus's go-to girl actor, appearing in this movie plus The House That Dripped Blood, I, Monster, and The Uncanny, which, whilst technically is not an Amicus movie, was produced by one of the production company's founders, Milton Subotsky. As Joanne continues to clean up, she hears a bulletin that interrupts the radio's carols. An escaped homicidal maniac is on the loose in the area, wearing a Santa Claus outfit he has stolen from a store. And of course, in proper movie tradition, she discovers to her horror that he's found his way to her house. What follows is a fantastic exercise in tension. Joanne, trapped between a rock and a hard place, can't call the police. She's still trying to stage Richard's accident, but is also menaced by the maniacal Santa Claus, who prowls around the house looking for a way in. It's a brilliantly shot and constructed piece, with a lot of show and don't tell, and a minimum of dialogue. And of course, in true EC ironic fashion, it's playing on the idea of Silent Night and 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. Now, while I won't give any spoilers here, let's just say that Joanne receives a suitable Christmas gift for her deeds. We return to the crypt, where Joanne is left speechless by the hooded figure's accusations, but before she can retort, he cuts her off before moving to the next visitor, Carl, who explains that he was returning home to his wife and children before he came here, setting us up for the next story. Reflection of Death stars Ian Hendry as the aforementioned Carl. Hendry is probably best known for his lead role in the TV show Police Surgeon, the forerunner to the Avengers, and his role of Dr. David Keel, the original star of said show before Patrick Macnee's Steed stepped into the spotlight. He appeared in Polanski's Repulsion and the Jerry Anderson live-action movie Journey to the Far Side of the Sun, Captain Kronos Vampire Hunter, Get Carter, the original Geordie version Divnyana, and Theatre of Blood, plus TV roles in shows including The New Avengers, Thriller, and Supernatural. True to his word, Carl is indeed on his way home to his wife and children. However, using a business trip as a cover, he's actually leaving them, as he's been having an affair, and tonight he is to start his new life with his other woman, Susan. She's played by Angela Grant, an actor best known for her roles in raunchy comedic movies, including 4 Carry On films, Zeta 1, What's Up Nurse and What's Up Superdoc, directed by Derek Ford, who we met in my Blood Tracks episode, and The Zany Adventures of Robin Hood. The two head off in Carl's car, but as he begins to tire, Susan takes over driving duties. Carl dozes, mumbling fitfully in his sleep before awakening with a start, and embarrassed, he explains he was having a bad dream. But before he can say any more, Carl sees an oncoming car and grabs the wheel to avoid the collision. The car goes through a fence before rolling over and coming to a halt. The movie then cuts to a first-person perspective as Carl awakens, having been thrown from the wreck, but he finds no sign of Susan. He staggers away from the vehicle, seeking help, but everyone he encounters reels in terror from him, until he eventually makes his way to Susan's flat, where, well, let's just say we discover the truth of that night's events. Now, this tale is very much an homage to two of the greats of the horror genre, featuring elements suggested by Lovecraft's The Outsider, with a little bit of 1945's Dead of Night thrown in for good measure. And whilst you'll no doubt have figured it out well in advance of Carl, and the timeline might not make much sense if you think too hard about it, it's an effective little entry. Although if this were a music album, let's just say this probably wouldn't be one the band would choose to release as a single. We return to an ashamed and confused Carl, who returns to his seat as the third visitor, a young man named James, accuses the hooded figure of playing some kind of game with them, saying he's trying to frighten them for some reason. The figure replies that he has a purpose and wishes to show them something they're capable of doing. We cut to the third story, a tale entitled Poetic Justice, in which the young man James complains to his father about their neighbour, Grimsdyke. James is played by Robin Phillips, an actor and director known mostly for his theatre work. He did appear in a number of television shows, including The Avengers and The Saint, and like every British actor of the time, he also appeared in Doctor Who. His father, Edward, is played by David Markham, a television and movie actor best known for his roles in Two Gentlemen Sharing, in which he also played Robin Phillips's father, Blood from the Mummy's Tomb, Polanski's Tess, and The Life and Times of David Lloyd George, which is probably best remembered for its theme tune by Ennio Morricone. Grimsdyke is a dust man, a waste collector in modern American parlance, who James speculates lives in filth, with his tiny house standing in stark contrast to the modern, more palatial houses that have been built in the area. He claims it's lowering the property value of the neighbourhood, but Grimsdyke refuses to sell, as he spent his life in the house with his beloved Helen, and his wish is to spend his last years there too. Grimsdyke is played by the icon of horror, Peter Cushing. I'm not even going to attempt to catalogue his career-defining roles here, because I know you know who I'm talking about. I will however add that Cushing was basically the Henry Cavill of his day, being a massive fan of Little Wars, a miniature-based wargame developed by none other than H.G. Wells, that was a forerunner to modern games such as Warhammer and Warhammer 40k. The role of Grimsdyke was initially a much smaller one, and Cushing was originally approached to play the role of Ralph Jason, in the next tale we'll discuss, but upon reading the script, he asked instead to play the elderly widower. Cushing had in fact just lost his wife Helen a year prior to filming, and so made a number of suggestions to director Francis, presumably based on his own experiences of grieving, including having Grimsdyke talk to a photograph of his departed wife rather than simply to himself. And no, despite some claims, the woman in the photograph was not his actual wife Helen. The old man is a friend to the children in the neighbourhood, repairing toys he finds during his rounds and entertaining them with games and his multiple dogs. When James concocts a plan to force Grimsdyke from the area, he begins by targeting his dogs, framing them for the destruction of a neighbour's prize roses and having them taken away by the police. He spreads rumours that Grimsdyke has much darker intentions with his innocent friendships with the local children, and even manages to persuade the local councillor to fire Grimsdyke from his job, which also means the loss of his pension. Unbeknownst to James, Grimsdyke has an interest in spiritualism and the occult, and employs a Ouija board to talk to Helen, who warns him of an upcoming danger. But despite her best efforts to protect her husband, there's more to come, for James hits on the idea of sending Valentine's Day cards from the whole town, in which he writes a series of mean and nasty verses. Heartbroken, Grimsdyke is unable to go on, and so ends his life. But when the police later enter his home, they find it spotlessly clean, despite James's accusations. A year later, James finds the leftover Valentine's Day cards, tucked away in a drawer, and reflects upon the anniversary of Grimsdyke's death and his involvement, something that comes back to haunt him in more ways than one. Now, this segment is best remembered for Peter Cushing's performance as Grimsdyke, where you can see he's channeling his own grief over the recent loss of his wife. Like the character, the loss did indeed take its toll on Cushing, who stated that after she'd passed, he spent his time simply waiting to join her. And physically he was left a wreck following her passing. Peter Cushing is only 59 years old in this movie. As for the story itself, it's another wonderfully grim and grisly affair with, well, let's just say a rather satisfying ending. Cutting back to the crypt, we see James, shocked and regretful, as he confesses, "It's true, I didn't like Grimsdyke." The hooded figure then turns his attention to the fourth visitor, Ralph, who asks, "What am I doing here?" To which comes the reply, "You'll see." This segment, based on Wish You Were Here, no, not the Pink Floyd song or the Judith Chalmers package holiday show, stars Richard Green as the aforementioned Ralph. Green is probably best remembered for his title role performance in TV's The Adventures of Robin Hood, but also had an extensive movie career, including portraying Sir Henry Baskerville in the first cinematic outing for Basil Rathbone's Sherlock Holmes, The Hound of the Baskervilles, plus 2 appearances in cult favourite Jess Franco's Fu Manchu movies, playing the heroic Nayland Smith. Ralph is an unscrupulous businessman who, despite his cutthroat approach and disregard for others, still finds himself in financial dire straits. His friend and attorney Charles suggests that he and his wife Enid may have to sell their home and collection of rare antiquities or face bankruptcy. As he breaks the news to his wife, she notices a strange ornament they purchased in China has an unusual inscription that states the statuette has the power to grant wishes. But, as the adage goes, be careful what you wish for. Enid is played by Barbara Murray. She appeared in a number of movies including Passport to Pimlico and The Punch and Judy Man, plus an assortment of TV roles, including appearances in The Planemakers, Robin's Nest, which US fans may know as the John Ritter remake Three's a Crowd, Danger Man and Department S. And like every other British actor of the time, she also appeared in Doctor Who. His friend Charles is played by Roy Dotrice. We previously met him in my episode covering the Empire Pictures classic Eliminators, so be sure to check that out for more details on his career. Now the story is essentially a riff on W. W. Jacobs' classic tale The Monkey's Paw, something two of the characters actually mention, so it's not really plagiarism if you credit the source, is it? I don't know. But given that The Monkey's Paw is a very grisly tale indeed, it's like EC's writers read it and then announced, "Hold my beer." Seriously, this is a gory and disturbing tale that will have you cackling and retching in equal measure. In other words, it's a perfect EC comic story. Upon our return to the crypt, we find Ralph in a shocked state. But before he can say anything, the final guest, William, or Major Rogers as he insists on being called, confronts him, demanding to know what he saw. The hooded figure turns his attention to him, and when Rogers asks what he wants of them, he replies his wish is to warn them of what might happen. At which point we then cut to our final story, Blind Alleys. Major Rogers is played by Nigel Patrick. A writer, director and actor, he had an extensive career in British cinema, including 1949's Jack of Diamonds and The Perfect Woman, 1952's The Sound Barrier, Battle of Britain, The Virgin Soldiers, and the superb heist movie The League of Gentlemen. And yes, that's where the comedy troupe took their name from. Rogers has been appointed the new superintendent of a home for the blind. Although he has no medical background, he spent years dealing with men and believes he can apply his military experience to running the home. This involves cutting costs on food, whilst enjoying wine and steak for himself, and other trivialities such as keeping the heating on. When the spokesman for the residents, George, complains, Rogers ignores his pleas, and when George lashes out in anger, Rogers threatens to set his German Shepherd Shane upon him. George is played by Patrick McGee. An Irish-born actor, he was known for his stage performances and collaborations with Harold Pinter and Samuel Beckett. But us Philistines know him for his performances on the screen, including roles in Die Monster Die, Dementia 13, A Clockwork Orange, Asylum, and Fulci's The Black Cat, plus roles in TV shows including Thriller, The Avengers, and Nigel Neal's Beasts. The cruelty and callous nature of Rogers' changes eventually lead to a death, and so George and the other residents come up with a plan to exact their revenge on Rogers. Blind Alleys is another tale of retribution and grisly justice culled straight from the pages of EC's comics. Rogers is superbly evil, exhibiting no sympathy for his charges, while George is his opposite, an empathic, kind-hearted leader who sacrifices his own comfort to give aid to others, and it's a fantastic dynamic between the two. With its 25-minute runtime, it's given more time to breathe and flesh out the tale, and it's all done wonderfully. Anyway, we return one final time to the crypt where Rogers, in full Major Rogers mode, demands to know what's going on, as he was on his way to an interview for a job and doesn't know why he stopped here. The hooded man states that he knows why they stopped, before announcing they may go. And, well, spoilers here, but if you've ever watched an Amicus movie then you'll know this, but each of the visitors has already committed the acts they saw and are now being punished, with the Crypt Keeper, yes, that's who Ralph Richardson was playing, announcing that they're going to hell because they died without repentance. "I wasn't warning you," he states, "but telling you why you are here for all eternity." Ralph, the character not the actor, then falls into a fiery pit, and accepting their fate, the others follow him. The Crypt Keeper then asks, "Now, who's next?" and turning to camera, addresses the audience directly with the words, "Perhaps you?" as Toccata and Fugue plays out the movie. Tales from the Crypt is a casebook example of how to adapt source material. The tone is perfect, with the gleefully grim and gory feel of the printed versions of each story being captured in an exemplary manner. There's a lesson here for filmmakers. If your source material is good, don't mess around with it. Because this is a wonderfully wicked movie that delivers scares and shocks with a fantastically sardonic smile. The ironic part is that Freddie Francis actually avoided reading the comic books as he didn't want to influence his direction, which shows just how good a job Subotsky did adapting the tales for the screen. Now granted, the Crypt Keeper looks nothing like his long-haired comic book counterpart, or the skeletal terror you may be familiar with from HBO's long-running series, but it doesn't matter as, let's face it, given the limits of makeup and budget this movie was made under, having such a distracting character would probably have been to the movie's detriment. And yes, the Crypt Keeper's dialogue tends to be a lot of, "And what about you? And you?" without the puns or cackling comedy of the comics, but the ghoulish delight of the original tales is still present and is translated to the screen without the need for a running commentary. Now, the Amicus anthologies are always a delight. Yeah, you may find an occasional weaker story, but it's always outweighed by the inclusion of another story that makes up for it. Like I said earlier, if you compare it to a music album, some tales are hit singles and some are, well, essentially filler. But that's not the case here. Okay, so Reflection of Fear is a little less effective, but to extend the album metaphor, it's less filler and more B-side. Of all the Amicus anthologies though, this in my view is the strongest of the series. If you're a fan of ironic comeuppance and macabre morality plays, then you're sure to love this. It manages to capture EC Comics' blend of the grim and the grisly, all served up with gallons of ghoulish glee. And I think that's enough alliteration for one day. And on that note, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all on the next episode of Real Obscure. This episode of Real Obscure was written, produced, and served with a side of delicious irony by me, Kevin H. Shaw. Excuse me. If you enjoyed this episode, then please be sure to like and share. You can also subscribe, just be sure to turn notifications on so you'll never miss another episode. I love receiving your feedback, so please let me know in the comments what you thought. And you can email me at hellorealobscure@gmail.com. And I'm over on Blue Sky with the handle @RealObscurePod, so be sure to head over there and give me a follow. You can help support Real Obscure by sharing the video or financially using the thank option below. Tales from the Crypt is copyright 1972. All content here is used for educational and commentary purposes under Section 107 of the Copyright Act, Fair Use, and remains the property of the respective copyright holders. Presented here for the purposes of critique, commentary, and discussion. No copyright infringement is intended, so please don't sue me or send me to hell for all eternity.